When I used to give talks at Roadhouse, I used to start all of them with, "Hi, everybody," and then they'd all come back with me saying, "Hi, Kayla," and it's something I kept going for about 4 years straight, and I really miss it right now, so I'm going to try this again. I'm going to say, "Hi, everybody." Hi, Kayla. That feels awesome. So happy to be here. So many talented people I get to share the stage with today, and so many great friends in the audience, so thank you so much for coming. Before we get started, I just want to get a poll of where everyone is at here. Who is currently developing for VR? Okay. Who here has at least tried the HTC Vive? Great. Who here is a VR skeptic? Awesome. You can be honest. That's great. All right. We'll see if I can change your mind by the end of this talk. So yeah, again, hi, I'm Kayla. Things that matter to me, things that are really, really important to me, is that I believe that VR is going to be a very incredibly important medium, and that everybody, not just an elite few, should be able to consume that medium. But not just consumption, but I also believe that everybody should have the ability to create in that medium. I believe that VR is going to be as important as writing, as film, as photography, is in terms of a communication medium where we can share ideas and share feelings with one another. And so I feel really strongly that VR is for everyone. We're not there yet. There's a road to go. The other thing is that VR is super exciting today. But today is a very small slice of where we're going. You can akin it to being the analog giant brick phone in terms of our road to the iPhone. If you look at the HTC Vive, if you look at the Gear VR, you look at HoloLens, you look at all these different pieces of technology that are out there right now, they're all points on a graph that are kind of leading us towards where we're going. This is a 10-year journey minimum, and we're only at the start of it. So yes, let's get super excited today, but understand that where we're at right now is only the beginning. Because really at the end of the day, we are creating universes here. And this text is really big. Okay. So we're creating universes here. This is a fundamental change. Never in our history have we been able to create these three-dimensional environments that we could get inside of and move around in. And as three-dimensional beings, this is a profound change. We can communicate a lot more different ideas this way. And we can interact with them in a 6 degrees of freedom way that we haven't been able to do before. And that is just fundamentally awesome and cool and amazing. VR disclaimer. Nobody is yet an expert in VR. So not me, not Colin, not anybody here today. So again, we're just at the start of this journey. Any feedback you get from anybody on VR is based on our current knowledge of it. I wouldn't call anybody an expert. It's just opinions. The best thing you can do at this point in time is experiment, prototype, and try things out on your own. And if VR isn't your jam, if you're a skeptic and you just don't want to do VR, that's cool too. Don't worry about it. I'm not going to pressure you. Maybe you'll come over to the dark side at some point, but just, don't worry about it. And the other important thing is that I don't believe that VR is going to replace screen-based gaming. There's lots of genres, lots of experiences out there that you just will not be able to do in VR, and you probably shouldn't even try to do it in VR. Worst case scenario, we'll just be doing screen-based gaming inside of VR or AR in the future, but those types of games and experiences will probably not go away. So to get everybody caught up to where we're at, last year there was a couple of really great talks at the Full Indie Summit. You can look these up and watch them online. Zach Barth showed everybody how easy it was to get started with VR by actually making a game on the HTC Vive in 17 minutes, including several crashes of the PC, which was amazing. The big question he got afterwards was, how do people get a Vive? Now you can buy a Vive, so that problem is solved. And then Kim gave a great talk on design principles of VR. You can see that talk online. She gives great talks of kind of design ideas for VR. I'm going to not cover a lot of those things today, but you can look those things online. So there's some really great information out there for people getting started with VR. And what have you done? You followed this shitty-ass template. And you're like, I got a great idea. I'm a game developer. I'm a creative type. I'm going to take some zombies. I'm going to take some guns, attach it to motion controllers, and it's going to equal profit. Fuck off. Zombie shooters don't need VR. There is absolutely nothing in these games that require VR except maybe for heightening a feeling of fear or allowing for cheap jump scares. If anything, the experience is made way worse by VR because it turns out people are pretty shitty at using guns, especially one-handed. When I do shooting games in VR, I hold the other hand down like a proper gun person would do. Experienced. Now, this isn't a talk to bash zombie shooters in VR. Okay, well, actually it is. But I don't 100% fully hate this game. Like, Colin invited me over to try Brookhaven Experiment, and I really liked it. I liked it so much that I curled up into a fetal position as zombies slowly converged on me, eating me alive. It was great. Sure, Kayla, but I want to make money on VR, and the market loves them, zombie shooters. Silly developers. There's no market in VR yet. Okay, but this isn't your fault. It's fine. Oculus was actually born from the first-person shooter, and the first-person shooter is completely infected by these zombies. So, I get it. Palmer Luckey came out with the Oculus Kickstarter because he loved first-person shooters and he wanted to make them more intense. First-person shooters were the most intense game that you could play on a screen-based medium. Surely the only way to make it more intense was to slap it on your face via head-mounted display. And indeed, if you go back to the Oculus Kickstarter, it included a copy of Doom 3 when you supported it. So you had John Carmack on board. You had a lot of first-person shooter visionaries really pitching VR in the first place. So you can really thank the first-person shooter for bringing the current VR stuff forward. Hell, even Valve, who quickly said how bad first-person shooters were in VR, did their first experiments in this space. They ported Team Fortress 2, they ported Half-Life 2 as their first VR experiments, but you can go back and see their GDC talks from several years ago telling you how terrible of an idea that was. And I also get it. Controllers reinforce existing genres, and we all grew up with a controller like this or similar to this. And these controllers were evolved hand in hand with the first-person shooter genre. These controllers actually represent the best way to control first-person shooter games, and first-person shooter games do represent the most immersive way to experience screen-based medium. But the problem is that these controllers are not super accessible. There is a limit to the number of people in the world that will actually take the time to learn how to use one of these things. It is actually very hard for most people to interact in a three-dimensional space via a screen, via one of these controllers. And indeed, in VR, we're moving way beyond this stuff. So this is my fancy little slide of what's not the future and what's probably the future. Keyboard and mouse is definitely not the future of VR. That's just terrible. You might use it in an AR type future, but definitely not for VR. And that keyboard and mouse was designed specifically for doing input on a two-dimensional screen. Gamepad is also great for manipulating objects within a 3D world on a 2D screen. That requires a lot of different things that I forget the word of. It's fine. But now we're to motion controllers in the VR space. Current tech offers some great precision and natural input in that three-dimensional space. These are just going to get better, and they're going to get more fleshed out and allow for more interaction. These are super great, and they're super natural, and anybody that picks up a Vive controller or an Oculus Touch knows how to kind of move their hands around, and it's super great. In the future, I see things getting even more natural in terms of input. Gaze tracking right now sucks because it's linked to where your head is. In the future, that's going to get better as headsets are able to detect where your pupils are, and gaze tracking as an input device will get a lot more meaningful when you know where the eyes are relative to where the head is. And then, as you go further into the future, you're going to see more natural touch and speech as big things. So back to those tracked controllers, we're already seeing a whole bunch of iteration happening in this front. Really, only a couple years ago did we even realize that grabbing something and throwing something in VR was a satisfying action that we wanted to have happen. And so Valve showed off a prototype last week of their kind of concept of making grabbing and throwing a more natural action. Their controller allows you to open up your hand completely and then clasp it down. And then this is the Dexmo glove, which actually allows you to apply pressure to your finger as you're grabbing things, and it gives you a little more of a haptic feedback. These types of controllers are going to innovate crazy and going to allow for a totally different ways of interacting with virtual worlds that we don't even know about yet. And so this stuff is going to happen and innovate very, very quickly. And looking really far into the future, what excites me the most about input is when you talk about voice and AI chat interfaces. Who here has seen this Windows holographic video? Anybody? It's kind of obscure. So basically what you have is, this is Microsoft's attempt of kind of showing off what their vision of HoloLens could be in the future. And what really stood out for me was the interaction between the hero and her AI agent right there, whereby she's having a natural conversation with this agent that's helping her through her tasks. I could definitely see this as being a very, very important VR input type in the future. You know, if you think about Navi from Zelda, but powered by a far more advanced version of Siri, or, you know, like Cortana and Halo, powered by a more advanced version of Cortana from Windows. I see what they're doing there with that Cortana name. Again, you know, we are just at the beginning of this stuff. You know, when we look at technology adoption lifecycle, VR is super, super early on. You know, we are well within that first 1% of adoption of this stuff. This is a long, long journey as we get along this path. What's going to be scary, though, is as we approach this chasm. So this chasm is where a lot of technology falls down. And in order to bridge that chasm, you need to have really great experiences that make people really want the technology, that make it just fundamentally required in terms of their lives. And I don't think zombie shooters are going to be what's going to be necessary for us to get across that chasm. So don't worry about the hardware. It'll get cheaper, it'll get faster, it'll get lighter, it'll get sexier. Lots of smart people funded by very, very wealthy companies are thinking this stuff through. But as content creators, we really need to think about what great experiences people won't want to live with that can only be experienced in VR within this hardware. And it can't be gimmicky, it has to be solid, it has to be amazing, and it has to be only possible in VR. So let's kind of quickly look at what the pros and cons are of VR today. So things that VR does well. One thing that people aren't really talking about is the focus. So when you have your headset on and you're in a virtual world, nothing else matters. You have your 100%, all of your attention focused on that experience. You know, when you're playing PC games, you're playing console games, most of your focus is on that experience, but there is potential for distraction. And mobile games are even worse. You're probably being distracted quite regularly. But once you've gone through the trouble of putting a headset on, your focus is entirely on that experience, and it allows for that much more deeper engagement that any other medium has had. Presence is, of course, the big buzzword in VR. It's only available in VR, whereby you actually feel like you're somewhere else. You feel like you're in a different space. You understand that space in a much more natural way. It's, of course, the thing that VR does quite well. Natural controls, again, we've touched on that already, being a big strength in VR today. So the things that VR doesn't do well. Complex controls. So a gamepad is really complex. There's a lot of buttons on there. You can't see your hands. A lot of things here won't make any sense. So VR games shouldn't have those complex controls. Short gameplay sessions don't make any sense with today's hardware. Again, when you look at a player that's going to go through the trouble of putting their headset on, they're going to want an experience that lasts 15 or 20 minutes for a play session, and you want to have that experience be compelling enough that they'll go through the hassle of putting their headset back on later. And of course, locomotion has its problems right now. Has anybody here played Eagle Flight yet? Yeah, okay, so if you think you get sick with motion playing flying games in VR, I really recommend you try Eagle Flight. It changed my opinion of how you can do locomotion and flying and make people feel good. They're doing some just crazy, amazing shit with that, so. Okay, so this is the section where I kind of talk about emerging genres in VR, or maybe just things I want to see, or games that are just kind of really inspiring to me that are beyond the zombie shooter thing. Thumper, yeah. So these rhythm flow state games, so these are games that really demand consuming you whole, so that you are fully within their world. You know, Rez did a fantastic job of this early on. Thumper just took that to cranked it up to 11. These are both games that you can totally play on a screen, no problem. They're totally fine. But if you play them in VR, they really shine. You know, VR is is what really allows these games to accomplish what they're trying to set out to accomplish. Yes, they're fine on a screen, but VR really brings them forward. And it's because that VR allows for that 100% pure focus. There's no distractions when you're playing these games. These games do consume you whole. And the controls are very simplistic and easy to work with. In my opinion, these are the closest things we have to system sellers right now for the PlayStation VR. Call of the Starseed. Who's played Call of the Starseed? Yeah, nice. Made in Victoria, or made on Vancouver Island. Great game. So point-and-click adventure games for PC were really great. They're really accessible. They allowed people to explore worlds, solve puzzles in a very interesting, narrative-heavy way, allowing for a lot of great exploration. I think there's a huge potential for this stuff in VR, whereby you can kind of have slower styles of gameplay, whereby you can explore spaces, solve puzzles, pick up things. I'll call these blink and grab adventure games, whereby blinking is what you use to move around and grabbing is interacting with objects. I really hope that more games are kind of exploring this foundation so that we can explore more worlds and try and see more stuff in VR. Creative sandbox games. Who's here has tried Fantastic Contraption? Yeah, okay, that's pretty good. Yeah, it's all right. So with natural input, the amazing thing now is that anybody can actually create stuff in 3 dimensions. Before Tilt Brush, nobody had any idea that paint in 3D would be a good idea or even fun. Medium from Oculus. Who here has tried Medium from Oculus? Far fewer. Okay, yeah, so it's a lot harder to try right now. They're trying to do like a clay type building type thing. I mean, both Tilt Brush and Medium are allowing for creation in 3-dimensional space that is accessible to a very, very large audience, which is just incredible. You never really knew that the normal person could kind of have access to these types of 3-dimensional building controls. And games like Fantastic Contraption allow for just amazing building. Fantastic Contraption absolutely could not be accessible as a 3-dimensional game without VR. There's just absolutely no way. So again, there's huge potential here for building, sharing these buildings that you're making, and just giving people the ability to actually be creative in 3-dimensional space. Who here has played Lucid Trips? Okay, few. It is literally one of my favorite VR games. I geek out pretty hard when I see Sarah. She's one of the developers of the game. So what I want in VR is my walking simulators. I love my walking simulator games, and I want to be able to explore spaces and just be in a space. Lucid Trips combines that with some really unique locomotion techniques. What you do is you have your motion controllers, and you can actually just use them as your hands to kind of push yourself forward and lift off the ground, and it feels like you're in a dream. And it just feels really, really great. And all I want to do is just hang out in that space and wander around in it. And I think there's a lot of potential there for the future of walking simulator games in VR, of just being in a space, getting some narrative through that, but just exploring it, because it's far more immersive than doing that on a screen. Narrative-driven plate spinner is kind of what I'm calling this genre. So the idea is in VR, it can kind of be fun to kind of maintain a whole bunch of things, kind of keeping all the different plates spinning. So Job Simulator obviously has a few of these types of things going on, but I think that there's going to be more and more of this plate spinning type genre appearing in VR, whereby you're at a station and you got to kind of keep everything kind of functional, and the fun is in kind of managing your time and managing your motion. I could see how that would be applied to two of some of my favorite games of all time, Papers, Please, or Cart Life. I really want a Cart Life in VR game where I'm like making espresso shots and like managing my life and trying not to get my kid taken away from me. I think that'd be really fun. Depressing VR games. It's just gonna be amazing. So yeah, Cart Life VR. Somebody make that, will ya? That'd be great. It's open source now, so you could just take that and turn that into VR. I'm sure it would port just easily. No problem. This is Kabibo. He is, without a doubt, one of my favorite VR creators out there right now. His real name is Isaac Cohen. He is doing some just fucked up amazing shit. So he is really experimenting with unique aesthetics. He is experimenting with really unique input interactions in the game. So he's putting out these different pieces. This is Loon that he put out. People have kind of called it a kind of blanket fort simulator kind of game. It's really, really hard to describe Kabibo's works in words. And that's kind of why I believe that the exploration in this medium is so possible, because some of the stuff you can create in this isn't expressible in words, it isn't expressible in photos, it isn't expressible in videos. You really have to experience it and be inside of it to experience it. So, from my point of view, VR has the potential to communicate these ideas and emotions in a way that perhaps no words and 2D imagery ever could. And I really, really hope more artists kind of jump into this medium, much like Isaac has been doing here. It's just amazing. This is like $3 on Steam. It's totally worth every penny. All right, come on, here we go. So yeah, now's the time. The future of VR is not written yet. The market is wide open, and the small audience that has hardware right now is really open to experimentation. This window won't be open forever, however. Eventually the market will solidify, and the ability to experiment and get noticed will close. But for now, the future of the platform does depend on experimentation, trial and error. We do have that chasm to cross, probably within 3 years, and I don't think zombie shooters are going to be what's going to take us from a kind of hobbyist tech scene to something that's mass market. So now is the time to dive in. And so last year, again, the biggest question Zach Barth got was on how someone could obtain a Vive. Nowadays, you can buy a Vive, you can buy a PC, you can buy an Oculus Rift. You can get started on this stuff today. So you're really running out of excuses. So thank you very much.